Hey yo, man, what's happening? Salute, 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 salute. You already know who it is. Nocturnal thoughts to all the boxing fans across YouTube world, YouTube universe, YouTube stratosphere. I salute you. What it is. Hey, real quick video. Then I'ma get out the way. You did. Look, let's balance the scales. Let's keep it real. You know what I'm saying? Let's keep it 100, 1,000, a grand, whatever you want to call it. Let's keep it authentic. Let's keep it in the realms of reality. Quick video, balancing the scales. As an Errol Spence fan, and as a Terrence Bud Crawford fan, and as a fan of the sport of boxing. Look, I think that when you look at a scale, when you look at a spectrum, this belief versus that belief, the way that people's paradigm is so unbalanced. You know what I'm saying? To me, that's just not life. Life is all about balance, in my opinion. Yin versus yang, cohesive. You know what I'm saying? Everything balances each other out. So, as an Errol Spence fan, sometimes you hear some things from Errol Spence fans that are too far, too overly. You put too much weight on this side of the scale, and you create too much of an imbalance in the not narrative, but just in the thought process of discussing Errol Spence versus Terrence Bud Crawford. And then on the opposite end of the scale, the opposite end of the spectrum, Terrence Bud fans, they do the same thing. They put too much weight behind their thought process of Terrence Bud Crawford, and it causes too much of an imbalance. Let me say this real quick. With a business mentality, with the sport of boxing revolving around business and economics, and these guys trying to create wealth, not riches, not to be rich. They're trying to create wealth, because none of these guys have wealth. You know what I'm saying? None of them. Floyd Money Mayweather is wealthy, and he's new money. New money. These guys are doing okay. They're rich, but rich is not equivalent to wealth. And that's another topic for another video. But as an Errol Spence fan, sometimes I feel like we don't keep it 100% honest. We are able to alter our perception of reality, and we don't objectively criticize Errol Spence, because what made me really gravitate towards Errol Spence, first of all, like I always says, his mentality and his demeanor reminds me of my son a lot. To this day, still he reminds me of my son. But anyways, his man down strap season to me was so official in his technique and his tactic and the way he was breaking down opponents. You know what I'm saying? The discipline and the physique that he was bringing to the square circle was very, very impressive. And as a fan, to not really acknowledge there was a point where you saw a decline and a regression in what he was bringing as an athlete, as a boxer, as a man down strap season. We seen him regress, and I feel like as a fan, we fail to acknowledge that. We fail to acknowledge that he didn't knock out Mikey Garcia like he was supposed to, like he should have. He didn't knock out Sean Porter like he could have. And he didn't knock out Danny Garcia, which he could have. We failed to put weight behind that. We failed to put the correct amount of weight behind the fact that Errol Spence, he did cook Kell Brook, but Kell Brook was already tenderized by Triple G, and we failed to acknowledge that. We put too much weight behind those victories. Now, those victories, in my opinion, are still good. He outboxed Mikey Garcia, which people were doubting his boxing IQ. He fought Sean Porter's fight, which people said he didn't have enough dog in him. He brutally, not brutally, but in a certain way, he did to what Sean Porter nobody else has done. Adrian Broner had a flash knockdown, but that knockdown that Errol Spence had against Sean Porter was very impressive in my book. You know what I'm saying? And he outboxed Danny Garcia and dispatched him after a car accident and a long layoff, and came back and used Danny Garcia as a tune-up. Those things are balanced. There's pros and cons to all of those fights. Kell Brook, Sean Porter, you know what I'm saying? Mikey Garcia and Danny Garcia and Sean Porter. There's balance to those fights. There's pros to those fights and there's cons to those fights. You can't just focus on the pros and ignore the cons. You dig what I'm saying? Same thing as a Terrence Bud Crawford fan. We fail to acknowledge that although Jeff Horn defeated Manny Pacquiao, we could tell that Jeff Horn was not a impressive fighter. He barely got out of that fight with Manny Pacquiao by the skin of his teeth. He almost got knocked out in the 9th round. A lot of people, that was very controversial. A lot of people thought that Manny Pacquiao was robbed. Although I believe it was a fair decision. It could have went either way. Manny Pacquiao definitely gave away a lot of rounds, but he also did a lot of damage. But, not even taking hindsight, we could see that Jeff Horn was straight up and down, no special effects, and that Terrence Bud Crawford would be able to outbox him, outthink him. He had a better ring IQ. So, although Jeff Horn was a champion, we knew that Jeff Horn was not really designed and built to be a phenomenal champion. Balance. The same thing with the angles. We give Terrence Bud Crawford credit for coming up weight divisions, 3 weight divisions, and unifications and undisputed, and we respect that and we salute that. But we can't just be enamored by that and not focus on. He did have a difficult time with David Benavidez, and David Benavidez was not 100%. Not to say he was hobbled or, disabled, but he had a obvious injury that affected his mobility in the ring, and he only had like 9 rounds of professional fighting between his accident, him getting into that situation when him walking his dog, and him getting into the ring with Terrence Bud Crawford. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not 100%, you know what I'm saying? But I think he only had like 8 or 9 rounds, 2 fights, 1 knockout in the 1st round and another knockout in the 8th round, But he still was labored in his movement, and you could see that his mobility was affected by his knee injury. We fail to see, as a Terrence Bud Crawford fan, we're not putting enough weight behind the fact that American was past his prime, glass chin, and his will had been broken, and he pretty much quit in the ring. So we were not able to really see he didn't really test the mettle of Terrence Bud Crawford. And the same thing with Kell Brook. Kell Brook was past his prime, and he didn't test the mettle of Terrence Bud Crawford. And, even though I don't give a lot of flack to Agitas Kovalauskas, I felt like he was a credible opponent. He definitely had some power. He had some size. He had some advantages. And he did knock Terrence Bud Crawford down. As fans of Terrence Bud Crawford, we have to acknowledge that Terrence Bud Crawford was knocked down by Agitas Kovalauskas. We have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that the resume of Terrence Bud Crawford as a welterweight is not as impressive as the welterweight resume of Errol Spence. That's balance. But we also can't just deny all the great things about that. For one, Terrence Bud Crawford knocked out Jeff Horn. He knocked out Amir Khan, or made him quit. He knocked out Kell Brook. He knocked out Jose Benavidez. He knocked everybody out. So even though I can see the angles in which these guys had, you know, glaring deficiencies that will cost them a fight against a great fighter such as Terrence Bud Crawford, who has all the tools in the bags that you can imagine and then some, we have to see that he still came in there and knocked these guys out. To me, that's balance. As a fan of the sport of boxing, as a fan of both fighters, I have to say, this fight, if not any fight, is a 50-50 fight on the scales. As a business mentality and being honest, as the business and the economy, the politics and economics do apply to boxing, with that mentality, as a Terrence Bud Crawford fan, you have to be honest and say that fight should be 60 for Errol Spence, 40 for Terrence Bud Crawford. Because Errol Spence has the better resume, he has the 2 belts, and he's a bigger draw pay-per-view wise. Now, he's just not a pay-per-view superstar, but his numbers are better than Terrence Bud Crawford's, and you have to admit that. 60-40 is fair. Like Judge Mills Lane used to say, I'm fair, but I'm firm. And to me, it's just all about balance. Salute to Terrence Bud Crawford. Salute to Errol Spence. I gotta be honest. There's no way to predict and guarantee who's going to win this fight. That's what makes this fight a fight that everybody should want to see. Is because skill-wise, it's a 50-50 fight. We don't know who will win. We cannot say that Terrence Bud Crawford, who has more versatility, who has more tools, who's ambidextrous, you know what I'm saying, who's had more experience in the ring as a champion. We can't say that those things are totally negated and neutralized by the sheer fact that Errol Spence is, bigger and stronger. We don't know. We don't know that Errol Spence is, natural southpaw, the way he comes and attacks the body. We don't know if the moment that Errol Spence, or the moment that Terrence Bud Crawford switches, creates a puzzle that Errol Spence can't figure out. We don't know who's going to win that fight. That's my point. And I'm not going to sit here, as a fan of the sport, I'm not going to sit here and just act like I know who's going to win that fight and I'm right and I can't see it any other way. I have to be balanced. I can see anybody winning this fight. It depends on who's focused, disciplined, who brings the best fight of the night. It's so many factors, so many moving pieces, but it matters on the 2 fighters. It matters on their trainers. It matters on everything. Who has the leverage? This fight can go either way. It's balanced in my mind, 50-50. I support both fighters. Now, if you ask me, if you would ask me 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, I would have said Errol Spence. And, it was a lot of questions after he had his accident that I felt like he answered when he came back and fought Danny Garcia. But I could still make a 30-minute video discussing the mentality right now and the potential of Errol Spence, what led into his situation where he did regress. And the same thing for Terrence Bud Crawford. You could do a 30-minute video on Terrence Bud Crawford on his situation with Bob Arum and his welterweight resume. Not going to do that. I'm going to keep this video nice and tight. 15 minutes. Be balanced. Stop being in denial. And the fighters and the fans and the promoters, they need to stop being in denial. This is a 50-50 fight or a 60-40 fight. And as far as who's going to win this fight, we don't know. We have to see it, and we want to see it. Period, point blank. This is Nocturnal Thoughts. I salute you. Have a good, blessed weekend. And everybody, yin and yang, man, it's about being a balanced person. Dig what I'm saying? Let's stop going into fantasy world. Let's keep it in the reality. 2 good fighters, Let's see two good fighters at the best of their sport, and the best man to win that night. You know what I'm saying? That's all I got for y'all. This is Nocturnal Thoughts. Salute.